everyone, Hamer back again with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm doing Season 6, Episode 4, which is called Mindbend. So this one starts out with a guy sitting in a chair, staring at some weird imagery and convulsing a bit, and then a man's face which suddenly appears to come right towards him. His watch alarm goes off, and he stands and shoots the face, which is actually a dummy, and then turns the gun on himself. But there are no bullets left. He's led out of the room he's sitting in, and a doctor named Thomas Burke says he's ready, his assistant agreeing. Burke gets a call from Alex Pearson, testily assuring him that everything's going to plan and Commissioner Beresford will be dead soon. Burke gives the man a loaded pistol, sets his watch, and sends him on his way. Beresford is shot in the street soon after. We cut abruptly to the mission instructions with what I guess is stock footage. Pearson is a syndicate man working with Burke to create these assassins who kill themselves after killing their targets, and the IMF must put them out of business. So we get an apartment scene where Jim tells us that Pearson and Burke keep their distance from each other to avoid being linked, and Casey has made a fairly lifelike dummy of Barney. Barney has prepared 2 pills to mitigate the effects of the drugs that Burke is likely to use, and he will take the place of the person Burke expects to get next. Barney gets a call at a phone booth and is instructed to walk south. Jim follows him in a delivery truck as he is picked up and put in a van and given blinders to put on. Jim is able to track the van to an industrial laundry and takes pictures, from which he is able to figure out where the lab likely is. For anybody who watches Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, you're gonna get those kind of vibes from those scenes. It's spooky. Anyway, Barney is given a spiked drink by Burke, making the room spin, and he faints. Burke hooks him up to some equipment, subjecting him to some sort of weird electrical spikes. Barney wakes up in a completely nondescript white room and is given dinner, which surprises him, as he thought it had only been a couple of minutes instead of hours that he was in the room. He's able to sneak out of the room after a little bit to have a look around, finding Burke's files. Willie and Casey set up her new apartment, and she becomes a model at one of Pearson's lively parties, and Alex is, of course, immediately smitten with her, also impressed by her knowledge of his art. She takes some pictures of him with a small camera in her purse. He asks to buy her cameo and have a further chat, so Casey says she'll call him tomorrow. Barney starts feeling the effect of Burke's drugs, so he uses his transmitter to tell Jim details about the equipment, including the tape recording with Burke's findings, indicating that Barney is to commit a murder the next day at 2 p.m., slides with the weird primal imagery Burke uses, the dummy that will be used for the target's face, and a theta wave machine to speed up the process. He prepares to take his booster pill, but it falls to the floor and is crushed by the incoming assistant. As Barney goes through the same process as the other assassin, becoming insanely violent and breaking his restraints, and seeing his target Harold Watson, becoming the perfect killer and being set loose. Barney doesn't check in, but Jim says they have to go forward with the plan. Willie somehow manages to get a laundry truck, and Jim sneaks into a laundry bag, which gets into the facility on a conveyor belt. Jim goes for what must be a fun ride until it's break time and he can break out of the bag, and then hides behind some cloths to take another ride up the conveyor ramp. Casey calls Pearson and asks him to come over for lunch, while Burke's assistant starts destroying the evidence. Jim finds the lab, but no Barney as time ticks by, and tells Casey to get a standby named Teak Williams ready. Switching up some of the stuff in the indoctrination room, but is caught by the assistant as he heads out, forcing him to knock the guy out. He tells Willie to go make sure that Casey will be okay with Pearson, while he finds out what happened to Barney, who was walking the streets in preparation for his task. Casey makes a Barney mask for Teague, and Pearson's men come to Casey's place to make sure it's secure before he enters. Pearson does. Teak as Barney comes through a wall, taking shots at Pearson and then diving out the window into Willie's padded truck, leaving the Barney dummy on the road. Pearson angrily confronts Casey about setting him up, and she says that all she knows is that she was paid to get him to the apartment by Dr. Burke. Pearson and his men head out, one guess, no prizes where they're going. Jim hears Pearson arrive, and there is a predictable confrontation. Burke tells Alex that he's completely off base, but of course, when they go to the room of doom and start the equipment, Pearson's face is seen and a dummy of Pearson is found. Pearson gets his men to start pummeling Burke for answers, and Jim leads the bound and gagged assistant towards a room, demanding answers about Barney, or else he'll be left to Pearson's men as well. The assistant wisely obeys. Jim tells him to take a walk, informing Casey and telling her to warn the police. But it's actually Willie who manages to get to Barney and avert his shot. Burke agrees to testify against Pearson, and Barney recovers. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a D. It is way too slow for my taste overall. But, and I was really prepared to give it a much lower grade, frankly. I was prepared to actually give it an F when I first thought about it. But watching it again, I said, as I always try and do, let's be objective about it. I'll point out a couple of good things. First of all, this is a very unique idea for a plot. It's a great thought for creating an episode. But for reasons that I'm going to go into, it just doesn't really come together well. It doesn't mesh well as a story. And I'll move on to that a little bit later. But the idea is a very good and I'll mention that in the revival series, towards the very end of season 2, there is an episode called The Assassin, which is almost exactly like this episode. There are some small subtle differences, but certainly the main part of the plot is virtually identical. I found that episode, thinking about that episode in the revival, The Assassin, to be much better. The plot changes make it much better. Visually, it's much better. I think it's way better overall because, as I said, there are some things, and I'm going to point them out, that just, this one just doesn't come together well. Jim's ride in the laundry is very, very neat. It's really, it was fun to see, the conveyor belt taking the laundry bag around, Jim going out and then going up the ramp and hiding behind those cloths. I thought that was really neat. Visually, that was a bit of a highlight of this episode. I also liked the cold open. The cold open with the first assassin and the way that he acts and reacts to, the imagery and the guy that he's going to kill and all of that kind of stuff. I thought that was really, really well done. It was a really, really good cold open. And because the rest of the episode, frankly, doesn't really kind of live up to the quality of that cold open, that's kind of disappointing. The only other scenes that I really did like, the only other scene, I should say, there's only one more, is the one where Barney actually really gets, the heavy dose of the treatment, so to speak, and breaks his restraints and acts all violently and all of that kind of stuff. That was really, really well done, and that's some fantastic acting by Greg Morris in this one. Moving on to stuff that is just not good. This episode just has so much weirdness in it. The whole episode, except for the scenes that I pointed out, just seems off. There's just something just not right about everything. The mission briefing at the beginning, almost invariably when there is a mission to be gotten, Jim, or Dan Briggs, or Cinnamon Carter once, back in season 1, will go and get it. They'll find it someplace in a drawer, in a closet or something like that, or they'll use some spy speak to get it. Here, the voice on tape just starts talking, just abruptly. And then we just cut to Jim, looking at some pictures. We don't even see the pictures. So clearly there were inserts and this was all kind of just put together from stock footage. I have no idea why, but it's just weird. And that just kind of put it in my brain that, okay, something's kind of already off here. There's other scenes in which this is the case. Jim makes a comment when he's talking to Casey after Barney is not found to make a mask of Teak Williams. Now, clearly he means a mask for Teak Williams so that he can impersonate Barney. but he said mask of Teak Williams. Now, why didn't they reshoot that scene? I don't get it. Were they just really in a rush and they just had to put this together quickly? Something really, really weird happened during the production of this episode. It's really clear. Some other things I noticed. During that scene where we have Teak Williams, first he comes in, and it's clearly Greg Morris, who comes through the wall and takes the shots at Alex Pearson. And then we cut to footage of Teak Williams, as Barney supposedly, jumping towards the window. You can clearly see, it may not have been so evident back in 1970 or 1971, but it's plain as day watching it now that is not Greg Morris. The guy is clearly not wearing the mask. And, and that's in story. In the real world, it's obviously because it's not Greg Morris. Also really weird towards the end. Jim tells Casey, once he figures out where Barney is supposed to go and what he's supposed to do and who he's supposed to kill, he tells Casey, call the police. The police don't stop Barney. Willie finds Barney and stops him. Just so weird, So many of these little things. And, if it was this one thing, maybe two, I would say maybe it's a coincidence. But the whole episode just really does seem off. And the biggest thing for me, the thing that really brings this down, is the villains. In Leonard Fry, who plays Dr. Burke, and Donald Moffat, who plays Alex Pearson, I just have to say, these guys, for whatever reason, are the two least charismatic villains I have ever seen on this show. And that includes James Patterson, if you recall, from The System and from The Double Circle. I mentioned that for some reason this guy just has a really downer vibe. And heck, even Morgan Stern. Yeah, I'm going to go even that far. Even Morgan Stern, if you remember him from season 4, Time Bomb, that guy was Debbie Downer, in male human form, and just had just zero charisma. But these guys, they just generate a new degree of apathy in me. To say that I absolutely don't care what happens to them is a gross understatement. These guys are just on a whole other level when it comes to that. I don't know. I can't really kind of put my finger on it, but that's just what I feel. I can't even call them lame schmucks. I just consider them to just be absolutely hapless nitwits. Thomas Burke, the doctor, he just gives off a complete whiner vibe. It's a complete turnoff. And he absolutely has the most punchable face ever on this show. The look on his face when he's watching Barney, turn into this assassin of his creation is just like, like, seriously, buddy, take one step closer. And that's just what I felt. I just literally wanted to just smack this guy. And, wow, he really brings out the worst in me. More to the point, Donald Moffat, who plays Alex Pearson, and this is really about the Alex Pearson character, it's not about the actors. Alex Pearson is probably the least menacing boss you can ever imagine. He's got goons, but, for this guy to be called, formidable or scary in every way, in any way, are you kidding me? I think that's really where it kind of falls apart. I just cannot see that it's another episode like we've had in a few recently where I just cannot understand how a guy like that, who just seems borderline pathetic to me, is able to be an underworld boss and have a team of goons, hired goons. I just don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's, I think, a big part of why this episode and the story kind of doesn't come together. Except for those little, brief flashes of neatness that I've mentioned. You know, I just don't see that there's a whole lot of real suspense. There's a little bit of stuff about, you know, Barney losing his pill and that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, that's one thing that I did forget to mention. Barney's ability to scope out Burke's entire lab without anyone around. What kind of security is that? There's nothing there at all. The guys have just abandoned it, and Barney can walk around with just like that. And even Jim is able to scope out the place without being found out for quite some time. Just amazing. You know, and again, that just kind of puts a bow on it for me to say that, you know what, I just can't give this episode any better than it did. We'll talk about it again, I'm sure, in the revival when we talk about the Assassin episode. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. It's always much appreciated. Please like this episode review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments, and I will see you next time.